The sun had just begun to rise over the sleepy town of Brookridge, casting long shadows across the brick storefronts and tree-lined sidewalks. It was the kind of town where nothing ever seemed out of place, where the postman knew your name and the mayor occasionally waved from the farmer's market on Saturdays. But beneath its charming surface was a growing tension, one most people refused to acknowledge. It lingered in the eyes of those who walked faster when they saw blue lights behind them. It hung in the air during silent glances exchanged between parents of color when their children left home. And this morning, that tension was about to boil over. Serena James stepped off the curb in front of Blake's Bakery, the usual scent of cinnamon rolls following her like a trail. She was 17, tall for her age, with braided hair pulled into a neat bun, and her uniform, polished black slacks and a pressed white shirt, marked her as a student at Haven Preparatory Academy, the most prestigious high school in the region. She walked with a kind of assuredness not often seen in girls her age, though not born of arrogance. It was discipline. It was the kind of quiet strength taught by a mother who never raised her voice because her presence alone could silence a room. She waited at the crosswalk, checking the time on her phone. Her morning internship at the Brookridge City Hall would begin in 30 minutes. Her mother insisted she arrive early to observe, to listen, to learn. Serena had no intention of being late, not today, not ever. But as she crossed the street, a squad car rolled to a slow stop near the corner. Officer Brad Kilmer watched Serena through dark sunglasses. He was in his mid-30s, clean-shaven, with a buzz cut and an authoritative posture that often made people second-guess themselves around him. His record was clean, commendations on file, a few neighborhood complaints here and there, but nothing formal. In his mind, he upheld the law. But over time, Brad had developed a habit, not of enforcing the law, but of deciding who looked like they didn't belong. His hand rested casually on the car door as he leaned out and called, "Hey, you." Serena paused, turning slightly, uncertain if he was speaking to her. "You in the uniform, come here a sec." She looked around. There was no one else. She took a cautious step toward the car. "Is there a problem, officer?" Kilmer scanned her up and down. "What are you doing out here so early?" "I'm on my way to City Hall," she replied, confused but respectful. He narrowed his eyes. "Got any ID?" "Yes." She reached into her bag slowly, carefully, as she had been taught. "It's in my student folder." But before she could fully extend the folder toward him, he stepped out of the vehicle. His tone shifted, subtly at first. "You from around here?" "Yes, sir. I live on Lawson Drive. Been there my whole life." "Funny. I patrol that neighborhood all the time. Don't think I've seen you." Serena furrowed her brow. "We just moved into the new development near the East Trail. Maybe that's why—" He interrupted. "Mind if I take a look in your bag?" "Yes," she said clearly, though her heart had started to race. "I do mind. I haven't done anything wrong." His jaw tightened. "Is that an attitude?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I'm just trying to get to my internship." There was a silence, brief but sharp. Something in his expression darkened. In that moment, Kilmer decided he didn't like her tone, didn't like the confidence, didn't like the way she stood tall. It was enough. "Turn around." "What?" she whispered. "Hands behind your back. You're being detained." "For what?" "Suspicion of loitering, interfering with a police investigation." "What investigation?" Kilmer didn't answer. He had already gripped one wrist. Serena froze, then pulled back instinctively. "Stop resisting," he barked. "I'm not—" She gasped as he yanked her arm behind her, tightening the cuffs with mechanical efficiency. People began to notice. A man from the bakery window stepped out. A woman with a stroller stopped walking. A passing jogger slowed to a crawl, eyes wide with disbelief, but no one intervened. Not yet. The fear of making things worse, of being next, loomed in their minds. Kilmer pushed Serena toward the back of the squad car. "We'll sort it out downtown," he muttered. Tears stung her eyes but didn't fall. She had seen this on the news, heard about it in the community meetings, but this wasn't supposed to happen to her. She was smart, respectful, following every rule in the book. Her mother was— Her mother. The thought hit her like a wave. Inside the sterile walls of City Hall, Police Commissioner Lorraine James was already in her office, reviewing proposals for department-wide reforms. A strong, composed woman in her late 40s, she had risen through the ranks with integrity as her armor. She was known for her zero-tolerance policy on abuse of power and had led initiatives to rebuild community trust. Every officer knew her name. Every officer feared her reprimand. At 8:13 a.m., her assistant knocked gently. "Commissioner James, there's a call you might want to take. From the front desk." She raised an eyebrow. "Patch it through." The receptionist's voice buzzed through. "Ma'am, we just received word that a girl was brought in, Serena James. She claims to be your daughter. Officer Kilmer arrested her this morning, said she was loitering." Lorraine didn't speak for a second. Her heart stopped. "What?" "She's asking for you. She's already in the processing room." Lorraine stood slowly, her eyes sharpened into steel. "Hold her there. Do not move her. I'm on my way." Meanwhile, Serena sat in a cold plastic chair, wrists still marked from the cuffs. The officer at the desk refused to meet her eyes. She had explained who she was, who her mother was. They laughed, softly, disbelievingly. One even asked if she meant the Commissioner James on television, as if someone like her couldn't possibly be the daughter of someone like that. But then everything changed. The sound of heels clicking down the hallway turned heads. Lorraine stepped through the precinct doors, not in uniform, but in authority. The silence was instant. Conversations died, officers stood straighter, and Officer Kilmer, who had just returned from the paperwork office, froze mid-step. "Where is she?" Lorraine demanded. A younger officer pointed toward the interview room. She turned to Kilmer. "You arrested my daughter." He tried to recover. "Commissioner, I didn't know." "That's the problem," she said coldly. "You didn't care to know." He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand. "Not another word." The rest of the department stared, unsure whether to intervene, apologize, or vanish entirely. Lorraine entered the room where Serena sat and knelt in front of her, checking her wrists, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly. Serena shook her head. "I'm sorry," Lorraine whispered. Then she stood, facing the small group of officers who had followed her to the door. "Everyone out." They backed away instantly. Lorraine turned again to Kilmer. "We will have a conversation, officer, but not in this building. Go home. Pending an internal review, you are relieved of duty." He looked stunned. "You can't." "I can, and I just did." The precinct was no longer silent. Whispers began, carried like wind between cubicles. Some officers looked away, others nodded slightly. For years they had watched men like Kilmer operate unchecked, but now someone was finally drawing the line, and it was drawn in permanent ink. Word spread quickly through the community. Social media lit up with disbelief and fury. How could this happen in Brookridge? How could it happen to her? Supporters rallied, protesters gathered, and the once ignored undercurrent of injustice that had silently shaped so many lives was now a roaring flood. Lorraine didn't hide from the storm. She stood before the community 3 days later, flanked by leaders, educators, and her daughter. She told the truth about what had happened, about what would change, about the work still ahead. And while some called it brave, she called it overdue. Because what happened to Serena was not just about a misunderstanding, it was a mirror held up to a town that prided itself on politeness but had failed to protect its own from quiet prejudice in uniform. The days following Serena's arrest unfolded like the peeling back of old wallpaper in a long-forgotten room, revealing stains and cracks the town of Brookridge had long ignored. At first, people tried to rationalize what had happened. They called it a mistake, a misjudgment, an isolated incident. But the video footage, captured by a bystander and uploaded to social media, told another story. A girl in a school uniform, handcuffed without resistance, pleading to be heard, while a grown man in uniform looked through her like she didn't matter. No one could explain that away. The video was shared hundreds of thousands of times within days. National news outlets began to cover it. And while Lorraine James never sought the spotlight, she stood firmly in it now, not as a grieving mother, but as a leader unwilling to be silent. She knew the cost of silence. She had lived it. As one of the few black women in law enforcement leadership, she had spent years navigating the unspoken rules of survival. Speak up, but not too loudly. Disagree, but not too often. Lead, but don't outshine. Now those rules were ash. That morning, she walked into the mayor's office without knocking. Mayor Douglas Wright looked up from his desk, startled. He was a polished man, always smiling for photo ops, always ready with an "I hear you" that rarely led to action. Lorraine didn't wait for him to speak. "I need full access to all body cam archives for Officer Kilmer. Every stop, every complaint, every unreported incident." Mayor Wright blinked, feigning surprise. "We're already reviewing the arrest, Lorraine. Let's allow the process to work." "The process," she repeated quietly. "The same process that's shielded him for years, the same one that calls my daughter suspicious for walking while black." He shifted in his seat. "Let's not turn this into something it's not." She leaned forward. "It is exactly what it looks like. And if you don't give me what I need, I will take this to the Attorney General's office." His smile faltered. The game had changed. He nodded stiffly. "I'll authorize it." By afternoon, Lorraine and her appointed internal affairs lead, Captain Rivera, were combing through hours of footage and logs. It didn't take long. What began as suspicion evolved into confirmation. A pattern emerged, one that showed Officer Kilmer disproportionately stopping, questioning, and detaining black and brown teens across Brookridge. Always vague charges, always suspicion of loitering, always dismissed quietly with a warning, but no one had connected the dots. Until now. In a closed-door press conference held later that week, Lorraine made the findings public. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't hide behind legalese. "This isn't about one bad officer," she told the room. "It's about the culture that let him operate unchecked, about the neighbors who looked away, about a system that demands compliance from the innocent while protecting the powerful." Some applauded. Others accused her of undermining law enforcement. But she didn't flinch. Because that morning she had looked at Serena's wrist again, the faded bruise where the cuff had bitten too deep. That was all the clarity she needed. Meanwhile, Serena was learning that trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in odd places, in the hesitation to walk alone, in the silence at school when her classmates weren't sure how to talk to her. Some avoided her now, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Others watched her like she might break at any moment. She didn't cry in front of them. She didn't rage. Instead, she kept a notebook in her bag where she wrote everything she felt she couldn't say out loud. On page after page, she documented her thoughts. Why did he hate me so fast? What if that man had a worse temper? Would they have believed me if I weren't her daughter? But even through that pain, something else was growing inside her. Resolve. She started speaking up in her civic engagement class. She joined the Student Leadership Council. She even asked her mother to help her start a youth advisory board for the police department. It wasn't for photo ops or awards. It was for the kids like her, who walked to school and wondered if they'd make it home unbothered. She didn't want pity. She wanted change. One afternoon, weeks after the arrest, Serena found herself face to face with Officer Kilmer again, not on the street, but in a disciplinary review hearing. She hadn't planned to attend, but her mother left the decision to her. The room was stark and formal, filled with suits and policies and procedural language designed to dull the edges of pain. Kilmer looked thinner, less sure. His badge was gone. His lawyer sat next to him, leaning in occasionally to whisper. When Lorraine entered the room with Serena beside her, a ripple of discomfort passed through the board. She hadn't brought her as a prop. She brought her as a witness. The review board allowed both sides to speak. Kilmer read a prepared statement. It was filled with regret, apologies, and what sounded like rehearsed empathy. When he was done, Serena stood. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm not here because I want revenge," she began. "I'm here because what happened to me wasn't new. It was just seen. I didn't do anything wrong that morning. I was going to work. and he looked at me and decided I was a threat. She glanced at the panel. That decision could have ended my life. I'm lucky it didn't. But we shouldn't need luck to be safe. The room was quiet. Even Kilmer didn't meet her eyes. The board voted to terminate him permanently from the force. But that wasn't the end. A group of concerned residents, some angry, some defensive, began demanding accountability from the department and City Hall. Lorraine responded not with platitudes but with plans. She initiated mandatory de-escalation and racial bias training. She proposed new community review panels, including student representatives. She made body cam footage available upon request. Some officers pushed back quietly or openly, but she reminded them, if accountability threatens you, then you were never protecting the people, you were protecting your power. At the next city council meeting, residents filled every seat. A few voices tried to paint Serena's arrest as a regrettable misstep, not worthy of systemic change. But they were drowned out by testimony after testimony, stories of quiet profiling, unreported stops, unspoken fears. Serena sat in the front row, listening, watching the walls finally crack. One speaker, a middle-aged black man named Curtis Mays, stood and said, "We always knew something was wrong." But this time, someone powerful didn't just listen, she acted. And the applause that followed wasn't just for Lorraine, it was for Serena, for standing in the middle of her storm and refusing to be silent, for proving that a single moment of injustice can ripple into transformation. But not everyone celebrated. Anonymous letters were slid under Lorraine's office door. She received veiled threats. Whispers circled that she was making the department look weak, that she had betrayed the badge. She met every whisper with truth. "I didn't betray the badge," she told a reporter one evening. "I saved it, because if the badge doesn't protect the innocent, then it protects nothing at all." At home, Serena found her rhythm again. The nightmares faded. She returned to volunteering at the community center, and one morning, she sat down with her notebook and wrote not just what happened, but what she wanted to remember. "I learned that justice is slow, but I also learned it can be loud, and I won't stop speaking, even if they try to silence me." And somewhere, a door that had always been closed for others quietly swung open. The world had returned to a kind of normalcy, at least on the surface. Serena walked to school again, but with headphones in now, music muffling the sound of engines idling too long behind her. Some mornings, she took a longer route. Some nights, she left lights on longer than before. She didn't tell her mother these things, not because she was hiding, but because she knew Lorraine was already carrying the weight of too much. Their home, once filled with quiet laughter and the easy hum of weekend routines, now pulsed with meetings, calls, and schedules packed with speeches she never asked to give. But Serena noticed the exhaustion in her mother's eyes, the way she stared too long at the dinner table, sometimes forgetting to eat. She noticed the quiet moments Lorraine spent in the hallway near the family photographs, as if looking at younger versions of them might remind her why this fight was still worth it. And even though Serena had been the one handcuffed, pushed, and accused, she found herself reaching for her mother now, comforting her when the cost of leadership made the walls close in. One night, Serena left a note on her mother's pillow. It read, "You didn't just fight for me. You fought for all of us. I see you, Mum. I'm proud of you." Lorraine cried quietly in her room, the kind of tears that fall when there are no cameras, no reporters, no walls to hold up. But outside their home, the storm hadn't passed. A local officer, emboldened by whispers of resentment in the ranks, gave an anonymous interview to a fringe blog, calling Lorraine's reforms a betrayal to Brothers in Blue and claiming that one kid's bad experience had upended years of good policing. The article spread like wildfire among circles looking for excuses. They printed T-shirts, made bumper stickers, held quiet fundraisers for those who enforce the law without apology. Lorraine didn't flinch. Instead, she invited that officer to speak at the next internal forum, face to face. He declined. She pressed forward. She reinstated quarterly reviews of officer conduct and created a hotline for civilians to report misconduct anonymously. More officers left the force, a few retired early, some filed formal complaints against her leadership. But for every door that closed, two more opened. Young recruits from marginalized communities began applying to the academy. Community leaders who had once kept their distance began showing up to her office unannounced, not to protest, but to collaborate. Serena helped draft new internship policies at City Hall, ensuring no student, regardless of zip code, would be treated like she had been. At Haven Prep, Serena's story was no longer just gossip, it had become a case study. One of her classmates, a quiet boy named Kevin who rarely raised his hand, began quoting her words during a debate on civic responsibility. Another, a Latina girl named Rosa, shared her own story of being followed in a store because of her skin tone. The silence was breaking. One day, during a school-wide assembly on community leadership, Serena was asked to speak. She stepped onto the stage not as the girl from the viral video, but as someone who had lived through the fire and refused to be consumed by it. She didn't read from notes. She didn't rehearse. "I used to think that if I followed every rule, I'd be safe," she said. "That being respectful, quiet, hardworking would protect me. But sometimes people don't see who you are. They only see what they think you are. And when that happens, it's not enough to stay silent and hope things get better. We have to speak. We have to tell the truth, even when it shakes the ground we're standing on." The auditorium was still. Not even the teachers shifted in their seats. "I'm not angry anymore, I'm not afraid, but I am awake, and I hope you are too." Afterward, students she had barely known came up to shake her hand. A teacher left a note in her locker. "Thank you for saying what so many of us needed to hear." But as empowering as it was, Serena knew the world wouldn't change overnight. There were still stares, still dismissals, still moments where her heart raced when she heard sirens, even if she wasn't doing anything wrong. Lorraine, meanwhile, was preparing for the upcoming town hall. It would be her most important speech yet. A full update on the department's transformation and a public response to the growing group of dissenters who had painted her as a traitor to tradition. She read every word of her speech aloud to Serena the night before. When she finished, Serena looked up and said, "It's good, Mom. But maybe don't try to prove yourself to them. Speak for the ones who've never had anyone speak for them." Lorraine nodded, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "You're right, as usual." The next evening, the town hall building overflowed. Reporters lined the back walls. Protesters stood outside, some holding signs that said, "Don't politicize the badge." Others held signs that read, "We see you, Serena." It was a divided audience. Lorraine stepped to the podium, took a breath, and spoke with a clarity that made even her critics sit up straight. "Some have accused me of dividing this town, but I didn't draw the line. It was already there. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." She spoke of fairness, of safety, of what it means when the people who are sworn to protect you see you as a threat. She reminded them of Serena, not as her daughter, but as a symbol of every kid who walks to school and wonders if they'll be treated with dignity. She read letters from families whose children had been stopped and questioned without cause, stories that hadn't gone viral but were just as real. "I'm not dismantling the department," she said. "I'm rebuilding its soul." Applause broke out, then silence, then applause again. Outside, Serena watched from behind a window. For a moment, she saw the town not as the place where she had been arrested, but as the place where her voice had begun to matter. She turned and walked back to the car, letting her mother have the stage. Months later, on the anniversary of the arrest, Brookridge held a community fair. Not the usual kind with parades and politicians shaking hands, but a different one, organized by students, activists, and city staff. They called it the Day of Light. There were booths about justice, art installations from local teens, a mural painted live showing Serena in her school uniform, holding a book and standing tall beneath the words, "Seen, Heard, Rising." As Serena walked through the fair, she was approached by a little girl holding her mother's hand. The child looked up shyly and said, You're the girl from the video, right? Serena smiled softly. Yes, the girl nodded. You didn't let them stop you? No, Serena said gently, and neither should you. Later, Lorraine and Serena sat on the hood of their car, watching the sky darken with fireworks. Neither said much. They didn't have to. And in that stillness, somewhere beyond the memory of handcuffs and interrogation rooms, beyond the meetings and angry voices, beyond the tears and trembling, Serena felt something bloom inside her again. Not fear, not pain, something stronger. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.